Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Keith Manconi. This is going to be another long one today. We've got a live interview for you from the morning show with Terry Engel. And we're going to be having ourselves a little tea party with the guy behind the Tea Syndicate. The Tea Syndicate is a group that's been working to bring Taiwan's traditional tea culture, or Gongfu Cha, to new audiences, all the way from the expat community in Taiwan to the, urban, kind of hip scene in Austin, Texas. We're going to be learning a little bit about that culture and also what it takes to spread it. We did this live on air on the morning show of March 9th, 2016. So we bring you back there right now to 10 a.m. on the morning show. Here's Terry.
ICRT FM 100, that is the Alabama Shakes, and new from them, or at least the latest single from them, Give Me All Your Love, 9 minutes past 10. Time for us now to jump into our Wednesday extended interview. Each and every week here on Wednesday at 10 a.m., we delve a little deeper. We have a little bit more time to delve into a subject and the person behind the subject here. Keith, what do we got this week?
Well, a bit of a confession before we get into this. I'm a bit of a coffee drinker.
Okay.
So I'm going to be about a little bit of a fish out of water in this particular subject, because today we're talking about tea drinking.
Okay, tea.
And the proper way to drink tea.
Okay.
And this will be expanding for me because I never do this sort of thing properly.
Okay.
And we have a guy in studio today who has been putting a lot of work into learning, A, how to do it properly himself, and B, bringing that experience and that culture in Taiwan to some people in the foreign community so they can enjoy it as well.
Okay.
This guy's right with us right now, Nathan Davis. Nathan, thanks for being here.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, so tea and tea culture here is what we're up against today, and we'll get into the ins and outs and that, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got involved and where your interest grew from. Maybe we'll start there.
So I came to Taipei originally in 2006. I had a government scholarship to study Mandarin and went on a date to Malkong with my girlfriend at the time, and they brought me the teaware and tried it for the first time and was just blown away that tea could be so good.
Mm-hmm. All good Taiwan stories start with a date, I'm pretty sure.
To Malkong. And then I just spent the last 10 years digging deeper into the culture.
Right. And your interest grew out of that. You talked a little bit about the States as well, and the fact that the tea culture is kind of growing there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's happening there in the States right now, because obviously tea as a tradition and culture has been in this area for thousands of years.
Right.
Whereas obviously Chinese tea in the States is maybe a little bit of a new thing, or at least there's a new type of movement that you were telling us about.
Yeah, so there's an emergence of this what we're referring to as Gongfu tea culture, this traditional tea in a modern context in the Chinese kind of traditional style. And I feel like it's exploding at the moment, even though it's not huge, but a lot of people are getting into it. And I think it has a lot to do with people slowing down their lives and becoming more conscious about what they're consuming and what they're buying. And, doing yoga or Tai Chi or going to acupuncturists and maybe not drinking as much coffee or, later in the day drinking tea. I know a lot of people who drink coffee and then later in the day drink tea. But also the ceremony, I think, and the ritual of it, the process of brewing tea is very captivating. Mm-hmm. So it's on the rise, and a lot of businesses have spaces. I think I heard that Google has a tea lounge now, and co-working spaces.
Well, if Google's doing it, then better get on board.
I'm sold.
Better get on board. And you're kind of bringing this to the expat community here. I know that there's a couple of expats that are doing this, bringing the ritual of tea and the culture of tea to the expats that live here, because obviously as expats here, Keith and myself, Keith even sort of admittedly said he's not familiar with tea or the culture here. There's a lot of us that come here as visitors initially and don't really understand how important tea is to the culture here. And
right.
That's kind of what you're bringing to the expat community.
Yeah, and so I guess I wouldn't say that I've offered much to the expat community here, but there are those that have, like T. Andy, who you mentioned earlier,
yep.
who has Eco Cha. And there's a guy named Emilio that has a company called the Jade Leaf that makes ceramics here and also exports his ceramics and tea and different teas that he selects. And so there are different expats that are here doing that. But I find that actually the expats that are here doing it are a little bit more solitary in their endeavors. And I think largely my assumption is, and thinking about it in the moment, is that back home it's novel. And so if somebody's doing it, they're your only access.
Right.
And especially to the product, because it's a product, and when people get hooked on it, they need to buy more. So if you're facilitating those exchanges, then a community evolves around that. Whereas in Taiwan, you can get tea everywhere. You can go
Just
to
walk
any
down
tea
the
house.
street.
Yeah. And so I think there are some foreigners here in the expat community. They've been here for a long time and really know tea, but there aren't any hubs to speak of, I think. So it's kind of, you have to track them down. Like Andy lives kind of off in the mountains at the moment, I think.
Yeah, right.
And so
A mountain tea
I've
man.
been trying to connect with him in the past few months since I've been back as well. And we've had that intention, but I've got to go off the beaten path to connect with him. So I think as far as expats doing it, there isn't a place where expats are doing it together.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, we got it right here. It's, we got a little setup.
We're here
happening
today.
now.
We're set up today, and this is the focus of what we're getting at here today. In a moment, we're going to go through the tea process, but the reason why we're kind of doing it, the reason why we're here, and the reason why Keith and I, in discussing this, wanted to have you on was because this is really kind of a process that, at least as expats here, and even myself after being here for 17 years, I'm still kind of mystified by the process of the tea ceremony. I have number of times sat in tea shops with the old boys drinking tea, or with my neighbors, or my extended family, or whatever the case is. I've hundreds of times sat and drank tea, and there's always been one person at the helm sort of going through the tea ceremony, and it's always kind of mystified me. Why is he dumping water here? What is this doing? How did and there's always kind of talk of something bringing out the flavors and whatnot. I'm that ignorant that I just have no idea what I'm looking at, what I'm listening for, what I'm trying to taste. So hopefully that's what we're going to kind of get at today. You're going to be able to walk us a little bit through the tea ceremony.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it can seem daunting in that sense, like people don't know where to start. And I think, it's I can talk a little bit about what I know to be the process of brewing tea and make it a little bit more accessible, perhaps.
Okay, good. Well, that's exactly why we're here.
And before we get into the actual training and ceremony itself, could you talk? I mean, you said that this is something that you've been looking into for the last 10 years. Can you talk a little bit about that process of learning? I mean, before we got you on air, you were even saying that you've done some research into this. So what does that entail exactly?
So largely it's been a personal process. And then as, in Taiwan, I'm another guy who drinks tea. And, there are plenty of foreigners who drink it and have their own relationship with it. But I was saying is going back home, the more that I've kind of gone back home over the years and started to share this with people, it necessitates an explanation as well as I'm making the tea. So I've done, a lot of presenting tea, which has made me in turn have to think a lot more about what I'm sharing. And my personal relationship with tea is rooted in Taiwan. And one thing that I've also learned is that Taiwan has its own very specific tea culture. The process is Chinese, and the teas are, Chinese in origin, but Taiwanese oolongs, which is mostly what they produce in Taiwan, are very unique to this area. And so I have a friend in the States that's been importing Chinese teas, and they're much more different kinds because it's so vast. But even through learning about the diversity of all the different kinds that come from China, white tea, black tea, red tea, even like obscure things like yellow tea and purple tea, and learning about the diversity of them and then coming back to Taiwan over the years has made me realize how much there is in this microcosm. And so there's a lot going on just here in Taiwan.
And very specific to Taiwan.
Yeah, and very specific. And I find that it's quite regional. So for what I understand, like people in China they kind of drink the teas that are mostly in their area. Whereas in Taiwan too, like most everybody here, if they're a proper tea drinker and they're using this, this traditional style, they're, using the Gongfu process, or they're doing as an art, are mostly drinking Taiwanese teas.
Right.
I guess it's just because it's here and it's accessible.
Let me ask you this, just to follow up on that then. Is there something specific to Taiwan? We don't have to get in maybe to all the aspects of what it is specific, but is it a specific culture here in Taiwan as well, as opposed to, Japanese tea culture, right. Chinese tea culture, this sort of thing?
Right. And I personally, I can definitely speak more to the leaves than the culture, but I have started to learn there is this resurgence of tea culture, or the tea arts, cha-yi, I believe, is the way that it would be referred to, and in Taiwan, where people have a certain process and a certain aesthetic. And one thing that's unique, so like the Gongfu method of doing it like this, with a teapot or a gaiwan that I have here today. In China, a lot of times you'll have a chapan, a tea plate, where the water is overflowing, and that you see that in Taiwan too. But with this kind of this new culture that's coming up with a lot of these tea art teachers, from what I very vaguely understand, is that there's kind of a new way to do that, and one of it's a ganpao, like a dry brewing method, where you don't let it overflow. And if I understand it correctly, from what I've gathered in my research this time, and like just hanging out with different tea shop owners, mostly on Yongkang Street in that area, there's a lot of tea shops and a lot of people who are into the tea arts. That I think that doing the dry pow method represents an element of control. Like you're not letting it overflow. You're being very precise, and it's not dripping. Whereas I think in the method where you use the chapan, the tea plate, it's about overflowing.
Right.
And just letting go and not.
Yeah, I've seen that tons of times. I'm like, what are you doing? All that tea's going down the drain.
It's like, it's just flowing.
Yeah,
everywhere.
right.
So that definitely has an effect on the way that you interact with the tea.
Right.
So it almost reflects your personality to some extent, how you perform the ceremony?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So you're not an overflowing tea kind of guy, Terry.
Well,
you're not an overflower.
I'm not. I don't imagine that I would be. No.
Control freak tea kind of guy.
No, but yeah. Okay, well, I tell you what. We're going to take a break right here, and when we come back, we're going to jump right into the tea process, and we're going to kind of make tea right before our very ears here, and have you kind of go through the process to at least help me and Keith anyway, kind of demystify what we're doing here, what we watch when we see people making tea, or as you say, the cha-yi, the tea arts. So hang on a second, we'll be back. We've got Nathan Davis here. He's joining us today on our extended interview. It's the Morning Show with Terry on ICRT.
We're ICRT. World-class radio in Taiwan.
ICRT FM 100. We return to the morning show here with Terry, and we got Nathan Davis, tea maker of sorts, going to help us kind of demystify the process of making tea here. We've got the tea in the background.
Folks can hear that brewing right now.
Yeah, brewing as we speak, or at least the water's boiling. Now, we're going to set up a little bit of music here just to kind of go along with this. You talked to us, maybe it was before we got on air, just about how back in the States and Gongfu Cha kind of becoming a thing, and people are integrating other sort of arts with this, one of which being music or soundscapes that's kind of going along with this, something that's maybe not part of the tea culture here in Taipei yet. Now, so we're going to get to some of this music here, but this is the music with Alex that we've talked about. Is this all we're talking about? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the music instead of me trying to guess.
Yeah, so back home, we've kind of co-opted cafe environments, or more like cafe oriented, or like yoga studios. And a lot of tea lounges are popping up at places like Burning Man or these kind of festivals. And so in those environments, you're definitely holding space for this process. So it lends itself to hearing sounds of the East, hearing monks chanting or gongs or, Chinese violin, erhu and guzheng and things like that. And so I've spent a long time, as I've been getting into the tea, also kind of imagining what the soundscape for this kind of an urban tea house sounds like, and have been weaving together these mixtapes or kind of tea DJ sets of sorts for this environment. So sampling from different traditional music and and mixing it with downbeat electronica.
And now tell me a little bit about the field recordings as well. Again, before we get to the tea process, but some of the field recordings done in China that you were telling me about.
Yeah, so I mentioned the More Tea EP that we're releasing soon with Il Gates. It's being released on Moody Music in April. And for that track, we used some samples from this massive archive that I acquired from a Taiwanese producer friend. I can't think of his Chinese name offhand, but in English he goes by Alex Peng. Mm-hmm. And I met him when I was living in Taichung, and we connected through tea actually. And I had mentioned that I wanted to do some studio sessions with traditional musicians. And he had this archive that he had recorded over 20 or 30 years ago in China of traditional music that he gave me to remix. And it includes studio sessions of both folk and classically trained musicians. Mm-hmm. But he also went out with a DAT and did field recordings of like Miaoju and Iju, these kind of Aboriginal peoples that may not even be there anymore. So, so I've got this sound library, and it had just sat there for a while until I could figure out what to do with it.
Excellent.
And so we took that and kind of chopped it up a little bit and made some remixes of it.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So tell us what we're going to be listening to right here just as we make tea. We imagine ourselves in a urban tea house right now, as you kind of describe it.
These are some of the mixtapes that I've made and posted on SoundCloud under Syndicated Tea. It's one of the mixtapes that I made.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll kind of.
And this is going to be featuring some of those traditional instruments that you were talking about?
This one doesn't, but we can play another one of those tracks in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. All right. All right. Well, here we go. It's tea time.
Time to demystify this thing.
Here we go. Now, what we're going to ask for you to do is kind of walk us through every bit of the process here.
All right. So now I'm just kind of rinsing out the vessels. So we have a gaiwan today, and the reason that I brought a gaiwan instead of a teapot is just because it's much easier to use. It's kind of the predecessor to a teapot, literally gaiwan, the lidded bowl. And so first as I rinse it out, I'm pouring the tea from the gaiwan into the decanting vessel, which they call either a cha hai or a gongdao bei. And the reason you use that is because if you didn't use it, then when you pour it into the cups, people are getting a different level of infusion. So if I poured yours first and mine last, then I'd be getting a stronger brew. And so I've got this tea that I've got here today comes from Chuanmenzi, which is in English it's called Stop By Cafe on Yongkang. And I've gotten to know Mr. Shun, the owner, the proprietor, pretty well. Actually, these are on loan from him today as well.
Okay.
I swear. And the tea that we're drinking is called, it's just a dongding, kind of very traditional, very typical oolong. And this one's called guifei. And it's pretty characteristic of just a basic low elevation tea. So it's not high mountain, nothing fancy, just kind of everyday tea. You can give that a smell.
Okay, so you've just put the tea into the bowl, the gaiwan. You poured some hot water on it,
and then you immediately pour that hot water out.
Yeah.
So is that decanting? Okay. So is that decanting water? Are we going to be drinking that, or is that just to kind of get the teas wet a little bit?
It's just a rinse, and that first rinse, especially with something like oolong, since these are, they can't see them at home, but they're rolled up into these little small balls. So, oolong goes through this process of roasting and rolling to where it locks the flavor down really tight in there. And so one of the reasons to rinse is just to help wake up the leaves and open them up. I guess one thing that you will hear a lot for a lot of people is that it's to rinse off any pesticides that might be there. But I'd like to hope and think that the teas that I get are good quality and well sourced and don't have that anyway.
Right. Now you just gave us the little bowl to smell the tea. Is there anything that we should be smelling for?
Yeah. So I think just kind of whatever you pick out of that, and I tend to reserved comments and more kind of listen to what other people are saying about tea. And a lot of times people will kind of say fruity, right? Like grapes, and like look at you with like wanting confirmation. And I'm like, if you smell grapes, that's what you get. But there are definitely things that you do smell. Like I have a Tie Guanyin here as well, which is Tie is iron. Yeah. Tie Guanyin, iron goddess of mercy, and it definitely does smell iron roasted. I mean, that's one of the major characteristics. So there are certain things about teas that you're gonna, pretty much everyone is gonna get. People in Taiwan also drink a lot of pu'er, which is an aged tea from China, and people, if they like it, we usually say something like earthy, and if they don't like it, maybe they'll say dirt. But they're going for the same kind of, they're catching the same flavors. It just doesn't set with them the same way.
So just very quickly, all you've done is you've rinsed the tea, you kind of got rid of that water.
Right.
And then you went ahead and you poured more water in and then poured it out. I mean,
it was interesting because the first time when you rinsed the tea, you poured it into the little cups, the serving cups, and then you poured it out again of the serving cups. So was that to heat up the serving cups, or what's the idea there?
Yeah, so kind of, as I was mentioning before, this whole, the process of it kind of originates from the necessity of brewing the tea well and serving it well. So with this, it's served hot, and with these small cups, it cools down rather quickly. So, pouring that initial rinse into the cup also kind of heats them up, rinses them. A lot of times you don't, wash these cups with soap and water. They get sterilized because you're repeatedly rinsing them with really hot water. So that's part of it as well. It's kind of this process of continuing to let the tea flow, waking up the leaves, warming up the cups.
Now, that's nice tea. Is that also part of the process, which is, you said not washing the cups and whatnot? Do they eventually take on the taste of all these teas? Is that the
I noticed a note of concern in your voice.
Yeah. No.
That's a really good question, Terry.
No. It's actually, I'm actually just wondering, thus giving every tea set, if you will, a different taste because of the history and not being washed, and the whatever tea or flavors the ceramic has absorbed.
No, ironically, that's a really great question. So, with this,
ironically, because most of your other questions up till now,
stupid.
You got a good one there, Terry. Gotta give it to you. I mean, I just like that you would get to that from this kind of we're sitting here and that question would just come to you because these are all. The irony is that these are all glazed, and they're not going to take on the flavor really because of that glaze. But if you had an earthenware vessel, then it would take on those things. And so, a really to really make oolong well, you would want an Yixing pot or some sort of an earthenware pot, which you've seen the little clay pots.
Yeah.
And the good ones in Taiwan come from Yixing, more than 20 or 30 years ago, before they ran out of the particular type of clay that they use. But those type of teapots are porous, and they do take on the characteristics of the tea that you brew in them. And so someone who is truly into tea and has a good Yixing or Chaozhou, one of these earthenware pots, will only brew a certain type of tea. And the more diverse they are and the more committed they are in their tea journey, they'll have pots that are specifically for specific teas. And they taking on the flavor of those teas is called yang. Not sure which tone, but it's the same as seasoning, like to season a wok or to season a skillet. So if grandma passed down her skillet to you and it's in good shape, and then you screw it up later because you washed it with soap or something like that, and then that affects the flavor of the food that you cook in it, because that grease, that bacon grease that she's been using for years, or whatever you're cooking in that skillet, definitely affects the way that your food turns out. And so teapots definitely as well, they kind of absorb that flavor characteristic of the tea that you're brewing. So if it's a really dark tea, then you're going to want to keep using dark teas in that teapot. Or if it's a really nice green Qing high mountain oolong, you're going to want to stay in that direction because you'll taste it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's get another cup of the tea here that you're.
I like that first one. Is this one? Should we expect a stronger will it have steeped longer at this point, or?
Yeah, so it gets stronger as it goes along, and oolongs go pretty far. So, this is like the third. I did the second and third steepings together, and it'll go. The next steeping will be about this. The next two will be about this strength, so like fourth and fifth, and then after that it'll kind of get cashed. Maybe 6 brews.
Weaken out. So about 6 brews from a pot of tea leaves. Okay.
Now, is there something that we should be thinking about as we're tasting this? Like, should I be sniffing it like it's a thing of wine or something like that? Or
so I guess the one school of thought is that there's 3 short sips. So just.
I already finished
I could have guided you through it, but I'm not.
Yours like
I'm not.
My college days are showing
well
through right now.
On the arts, the arts. But for me, it's like I enjoy good tea, and then I know how to brew it decently. But I guess the proper way, the more refined way to do it is 3 sips.
3 sips, okay.
And then now that your cup is dry, after it kind of dries out. You can give it a little bit of a shake if you want to help it kind of air out.
Oh, okay.
It's got a fragrance in there, and they call that the longshang, the cold fragrance.
Right. Now, I'm just smelling my cup after it's gone.
Just get your nose in there.
Now, for me, I don't know about you guys, but it kind of has like a pipe smell, like almost a tobacco-y pipe smell.
I got a little bit of that,
You guys got that?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sweet
tobacco. A little bit about.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was looking for you on confirmation of that.
Yeah. It's pipe
tea approval.
Anyone else get
Interesting. Oh, no. Was there a joke there? We're not good with tea jokes. We don't understand tea humor. Like, we're barely at the point of being able to drink it without spilling it on ourselves.
I need to call my buddy Sohan in Austin, who's kind of a tea guru, rock star guy there.
He's got the tea puns?
He's got the tea puns.
Oh, man.
I couldn't even explain what a tea pun was. But I don't know, but they exist. I just don't have them.
Let me ask you this, just as we kind of go through this and we're digging the groovy tunes in the background and all this. What do all of like the old tea cats from around Taipei, the guys that have had their shops for 20, 30, 40 years and they're, very traditional tea making and very knowledgeable. What do they think about, for example, you as an expat coming into their shop and kind of not turning the culture upside down, but infusing a new breath of fresh air into it with music, or when you tell them about, you've made a DJ mix, for a tea house and what's the reaction from the old culture to this maybe newer modern urban
cross-cultural?
Yeah. What's the reaction?
I'd have to, the first thought that came to mind is what are people's reactions to me as a foreigner as I've gone in over the years? And I can say that in that Taiwan is always been very open and inviting for me. With tea culture, it's the same. Tea shop owners are always very open to share, and aren't critical of hey, are you a real tea drinker? They'll just start somewhere very obvious if you don't know tea. When I first started drinking tea, I didn't know what a guifei or tie guanying it was all oolong. And as I first started drinking tea, and walking into a shop, they were always open with sharing it. And they might not share their greatest, their reserved tea, but they would start brewing something very simple as a way to introduce me to it, And I think the expectation is that, if you like it, you're going to buy some later. And I did, and I built those relationships, and it's always been really open. And it continues to be. In Yongkang right now, there's a resurgence. There's something more than 50 tea shops in that area now around Yongkang. And a lot of them are newer and trying to do tea in a very new and accessible way. And I find all those spaces to be really open and inviting to coming in and participating with what they're sharing. But I find that either on the music side with DJ friends, or on the tea side with tea friends, trying to talk about what I'm doing that's blending the two doesn't make sense to either one. So I don't talk about it a lot. Yeah, okay. Because it kind of, when I do, it ends up seeming like I'm trying to project it onto this culture, and I'm not trying to necessarily create something in Taiwan. Right. I'm just kind of creating something, and it doesn't quite make sense yet in Taiwan.
Right. Something that makes sense to you.
Well, it's setting a nice vibe here. I'm digging this.
Tell us maybe just very quickly here then about what modern tea culture means, as we're kind of going through traditional tea culture. What does modern tea culture mean in Taiwan, or at least as far as you have experienced it?
I think in Taiwan they do traditional really well.
Right, okay, I see.
But new ideas in Taiwan, I have to say that like a lot of times the execution is lacks direction. So a lot of the places that I've seen, if they're doing tea in a way that makes sense, like it's a chahang, it's a tea shop, and you walk in and you're like, this is a tea shop. What tea do they have? If they can be presenting it in a new way aesthetically or whatever, but as long as the model is that business model that people are used to, it works. Also, if it's a tea shop, if it's a chaguan, and people go in and they know you walk in and this is a tea house, and I'm going to come in with my friends and we're going to drink tea, it works. But some hybrid models like Chuanmenzi, where I got this tea, the owner, Mr. Shun, is kind of a well-known interior designer, and he's been working with people on tea house design, I think, of late, and he really just enjoys tea, and so his shop is a hybrid, and you walk in and the shop is like part tea shop, part tea house space, and then downstairs there's a little events venue. And he's been there for 2 years, and I've kind of asked him about how he's done, and it seems like the first year did all right, and the second year the business is kind of doing okay. But I think back home, I do quite a bit of work with like small pop-up shops and restaurants and things like that in the food industry and the service industry. And I've realized that when people walk in as a customer, if it clicks right away, there's an immediate connection with like the product or the service, and there's not a strong barrier to interacting with that. Whereas when you walk into this space where the idea of combining these three different things is awesome, but in the execution, if as a customer you walk into the space and you're like, is it a tea shop? Is it a tea house?
Or is it something else?
Or is it something else? And then that pause can be enough for people to go,
to
and
be
then
a
walk
little
out to
too
another shop.
unsettling. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
good. We got to take ourselves another break here as we enjoy some tea over the break. We'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to The Morning Show with Terry right here on ICRT.
Oh my gosh, they have a crazy group.
They play music.
I like their interviews.
They're up to date on entertainment.
If you're looking for a place where the music is actually melodic, the information is up to the minute, and English is the order of the day, then look no further than FM 100 ICRT.
We return to The Morning Show here. We're sitting in with Nathan Davis having a little tea.
Exactly, and we just kind of wrapped up our little tea ceremony here, and I gotta say, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to anything that involves the word tea or ceremony, really. But I was into that. That was a lot of fun. Now, you were telling us a little bit earlier about how in the U.S., in Taiwan, there's a lot of people that had not been exposed to this culture earlier that are kind of getting into it. And just based on what you were saying, it sounded like it was almost a way to kind of slow down, get more connected with the moment that you're in, get more connected with a certain part of life that we don't normally think about. And it's kind of interesting to me because in a way what this is, I mean, the first thing that I see when I look at this is almost like another consumer sort of thing. I mean, tea is a consumer good. It's a thing that you buy. You got to get this whole setup, then you got to get the tea. So how is this different from other stuff that we might think of when we're thinking of consumerism?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a really good question. You got another really good question.
Geez,
Try
we're
to always
surprising
act
you.
surprised.
Great, you really.
You'd almost think we did it for a living.
I think, yeah, it's a consumer product, but once you look at the leaves as something that, take a certain skill to prepare, it lends itself to slowing down and thinking about it as something more than just a product that you're consuming. So, in that the taking these certain vessels and the time that it takes to brew it, you can't just, like grabbing a Starbucks coffee on the way, where they push a button, you get the espresso, and you walk out the door and it tastes good. You get there and it's a consistent flavor. You like it, it's good. With tea, it takes a little bit more work than that, and it takes more equipment. Not saying that espresso doesn't take a lot of work, because good espresso does take a lot of work, but the infrastructure is there, right? So I think it's kind of the same with tea. Like, you have to go to where the teaware is. Like, even me bringing this equipment today took a little bit of work, because it's not meant to travel. It's meant to stay in a place.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you go there to drink it, so it's not meant to package it up and take it with you.
There's a certain amount of thoughtfulness that's involved that isn't necessarily there when you just hit a button and your coffee comes out.
Yeah, exactly. And mindfulness, I would say, too, which that, I would say, for a lot of the consumers that are getting into tea culture back home, it's that mindfulness. So one, on a spiritual sense of getting into things like yoga and wanting to have an intentional lifestyle and slowing down and interacting with something like coffee and the process of it. But also, I guess, as conscious consumers, like, people back home want a lot more transparency. People want to know where they're what they're drinking or what they're eating, where it comes from, or what they're buying. Even companies like Tom's Shoes, having a very obvious business model of, you buy a pair of shoes and we give a pair of shoes to somebody else.
Yeah.
People want to know, where did this come from?
Right.
And that's a tricky question when your tea is coming from Asia, because people are like, is it organic? And we're like, well,
Hard to answer. It's a ways away.
What does that mean in the extended environment of Asia and China and Taiwan? Is it organic?
Let's kind of end and wrap it up here. Just because I'm really kind of fascinated with this idea of tea drinking and the process and the mindset kind of getting picked up and transplanted in America. And you said, and you've alluded to the fact that this is sort of becoming a thing. What do you envision for the future of this, or for tea? Is this something that is going to be too involved with, as you say, not enough infrastructure? Is this going to be something that people really kind of adopt the process? I think it kind of follows on Keith's question about consumerism, because what is it that people are going to sink their teeth into about this that is going to make it big in America, and how do you see that?
So, yeah, I mean, I see it exploding right now in the West, and I mentioned that Google even has a tea lounge, and things like that, and there's a lot of co-working spaces too. A lot of spaces where people are, they're still getting things done and they're still living their lives in the way that they have been, but they're taking time to break things up, the monotony a little bit, and have a little bit more process or ritual or mindfulness in their daily lives, and become more conscious consumers and think about what they're putting into their body. So I think as that grows, like, this culture will continue to grow as well. And people are, a lot of people are coming. Like, just in the 5 months that I've been here, I've connected with at least 3 or 4 people that I can think of off the top of my head, just passing through, that are coming to Taiwan for tea stuff. And,
really?
Yeah, and even like starting tea businesses. There was a guy named
wow.
Jeremy that has he was a genetic, he was doing a PhD in genetics at Duke, and left the program because he got into mindfulness and yoga, and started a pop-up tea shop at a farmer's market.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
So,
You're stealing our best and brightest.
A lot of that happening where people are tea lends itself also to creativity in a certain way. Like, I'm starting to feel a little bit chadsui now. I'm getting the tea buzz.
I can feel that a little bit.
Right, chadsui.
Chadsui.
Okay, well, let's end it there. Maybe you can give us a little a rundown as to where people can get involved online. Are there some groups that are available online where people can get some more information? Maybe there's some folks that people could contact.
Yeah.
Your page is the Tea Syndicate?
Yeah, the Tea Syndicate. And I left that really static for a while because I was trying to get away from being like the tea guy. I was like, I'm not just tea, it's about people and connection and exchange, which is where the Syndicate idea kind of came from. Is like tea's kind of being exchanged in little baggies like Bud. We're like doing these back alley deals back home. Hey, did you bring the product? And we're like,
right. People think you're doing something
that's
you're
how
not.
It's like largely, like scooping it out and being like, I don't know, is that a gram? Like, feels like a gram.
Nothing illicit going on here, by the way, Taipei's authorities.
And but I've had to, I like it. I kind of smuggle the tea out because, like, I don't know, when I go through customs in Los Angeles and I have a 5-pound box of pu'er that's in this little crate and it's got little rusty hinges, because it's been sitting there for 10 years. I don't know what customs is going to think if they stop you, if they're going to let you bring it through. So the Tea Syndicate, you can kind of see of some things that I've done and kind of me going back and forth from China and Austin over the years. And
so that's a WordPress page, the Tea Syndicate on WordPress?
Exactly, yeah.
And then there's also a Facebook page that people can go visit?
Yeah, and I would say that the Facebook page is a gold mine at the moment. Nikki Evers from the Bay Area.
And this is called Gongfu Cha on Facebook?
Yeah, just on Facebook. If you just look for Gongfu Cha, you'll find it. And I think there's they just broke over 600 members, which for that little small community felt like quite an accomplishment. And it's been one of the main ways that I've continued to connect with people. So Nikki really started a great thing by creating this page, this community online where people who are interested in this culture can connect. And certainly in the Bay Area, there's been a strong tea culture for decades because of the Asian influence. But in places like Austin and other kind of more metropolitan cities in the States, it's really new. Like whenever I came to Taiwan 10 years ago and got into tea, like nobody in Austin knew what was going on.
Yeah, right. Of course, it was a new thing.
The other friend, Sohan, that I mentioned, that now has an import company, kind of just fell into importing because over the years he's been going back and forth. And I was taking Taiwanese teas back, but they're kind of pricier than a lot of Chinese teas. But friends were like, hey, bring us back some tea. And as he brought it back, he was just bringing more and more and just realized that he had a tea company just because the demand is there.
Okay. And lastly then here, very last thing, anywhere that, say, expats living here in Taiwan or folks who want to get more involved in tea right here in Taiwan, is there anything that they can do here?
Yeah, I would say one, even just using that Gongfu Tea page the Gongfu Cha page as a way to just let people know you're in Taiwan.
Okay.
But also the areas. So if you want to get to know the Taiwanese tea scene, I would say go hang out on Yongkang Street.
Okay.
And Dihua J also has some pretty cool stops. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, thanks so much. Nathan Davis joining us here this morning with his knowledge of the tea culture, I suppose. I don't want to say industry.
Tea culture.
Tea culture.
All right, we'll be back in just a couple of moments with your theme for requests. This is De La Soul in the meantime on ICRT.
Once again, the place to go to learn more about Nathan's work is syndicatedtea.wordpress.com. Or, just Google Tea Syndicate Nathan, probably going to find it. This has been another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk in collaboration with The Morning Show. You can hear more of these extended interviews, just like the one you just heard, live on air each Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. And you can find dozens upon dozens upon dozens, really getting up there, more interviews on the Taiwan Talk podcast stream, bringing you conversations from and about Taiwan. That show broadcasts each Monday at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. right after the news broadcast, or you can find it online at the ICRT website, on iTunes, and a lot of other places where podcasts are purveyed. If you are listening to it online, please do take a second to rate and review through whichever purveyor you are using. It really does help get the word out about it, so we do really appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening today. For Taiwan Talk and The Morning Show, I'm Keith Manconi. See you next time.